This is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing Clifford Goodall for the first time. This interview is taking place at Fayetteville, North Carolina on October the 22nd, 2017. This interview is being conducted by the Making History Project. Clifford, go ahead and tell me, when were you born?
I was born August 29th, 1925,
And where were you born?
Chicago.
Right? The Windy City.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it was.
And how big was your family?
Actually, I had 5 sisters and a brother, and of course mother and father. So there was 7 children really, and I was the oldest of the 7. And of course I have 4 sisters that are passed away now, and I'm the oldest. I guess it's not supposed to work that way, is it? But anyway, I have one sister. I beg your pardon. I have 2 sisters left, and one of them, she is 20 years younger than me, by the way. So I'm 92, so she's. I always know how old she is because she's 20 years younger, so she's 72.
Okay. And tell me a little bit briefly about your mother and your father.
Well, my father, and of course, I really remember back probably, during the Depression, and I suspect I was probably, at the height, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, something like that. And my father, he was a purchasing agent at Delta Star Electric Company, and he was only working 3 days a week, which was fortunate because a lot of people weren't working, period. And of course, back in those days, my mother, she never did work. That was just the way it was. Women didn't work, so. But they were very good parents, and I loved them, and I don't know what else I can say.
They were working through the Great Depression.
Yeah, basically, yes. Matter of fact, we did have a house, and this was in Elmwood Park, which is it's right next to Chicago. I could walk to Chicago. And we lost the house because we couldn't make the payments. And then we moved, still in Elmwood Park, but at a different section. And we were up there for quite a number of years. And then later on, when things got better, then my father went back to almost where we were originally and bought a house down there for I think it was $5,000. Eventually was sold many, many years later for close to $200,000. So, and then my one sister was living there with 4 children. That's kind of a strange situation because she had married a Navy commander, and they were down in Guantanamo Bay when they had all this Russian thing going on. The Russians were putting, these, I guess it probably was atomic bomb things or whatever. And so they, when they were going to have, this possible conflict, then they sent my sister back to Chicago. And they sent her back. Her husband died, by the way. He was playing ball, 32 years old, had a heart attack. So anyway, they sent her back with a doctor and a nurse, and the doctor and the nurse were told, you stay with her. And that was on a Friday they arrived, and on Monday she had the last child. So that was kind of a nightmare. But they really looked after her, I have to say that. So the Navy did a nice job on that.
And what suburb of Chicago did you live in?
Elmwood Park.
All right. And what was it like living in Chicago back in the, growing up in the 30s and 40s?
Yeah, it was great. Actually, Elmwood Park was, I guess you could call it, two different. There was probably the majority were Italians, and then there was about 3 blocks that was all Polish, and never had any problems or anything like that. That's just the way the lineup was. So everybody got along. I never really saw any big trouble or anything like that. So it was nice. It was good. I liked it.
And what is your family's ethnic background?
Well, my daughter, well, first of all, my father was born in Canada, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And my mother, she was born in Chicago. And my father came in from Canada and I guess ran into her somewhere. And, he married her here. And I think he really always wanted to, go back to Canada because he didn't become a citizen until a number of years later. And I guess he kind of figured, well, he's not going back. So, but that's essentially what it was. I think, my daughter had me take some of the, I guess saliva or something like that and send it in here just recently. And she did the same thing. And it turned out we were both 83% Irish. So don't ask me why, but that's what they said.
Okay. And what were you doing before World War II?
Well, actually, I was going to school, and quite frankly, I hated it. It really was kind of stupid, but that's the way I was. And so I think it was. I think I was in about the second year. And I had gone to a couple of high schools, and finally my father said, you pick out one, you stay with it, because I was always complaining about it. Well, anyway, when I turned 17, that's when I decided, I said, hey, I'm gonna go into the service, and that was because Pearl Harbor was bombed. So anyway, so I joined the Navy when I was 17. And was sent to the well, first of all, I went there with 2 friends of mine.
What year was this?
That was that was April 22nd, 1943. And 2 of my friends went with me, and we were going to be together. And so we signed up, and I'll show you how really smart I was. The recruiter, he said, do you want a hitch, which I knew was 6 years, do you want duration of the war, or do you want a minority cruise? And I said, well, the minority cruise sounds like the least to me. I said, give me the minority cruise. I find out later it means that I was going to be in until I was 21. If I'd have taken the duration of the war, I had all kind of points and what have you. I could have got out, but some of my friends were waving to me on the ship out in the Pacific when it hit San Francisco, say, "So long, Cliff. See you later." So I was still out there until I was 21, and then finally got off of that. And that's pretty. But these 2 friends of mine, I went to Great Lakes in the Chicago area, which was fine. One of them went to Farragut, Idaho, and the other guy went down to Bainbridge, Maryland. Never saw him until the end of the war. So that didn't work out too good. We thought we were all going to be together. Well, it didn't work out that way.
Why did you choose the Navy?
Well, first of all, I was 17 and I knew I could get in the Navy. And I like the Navy. I don't know why, but I did. And at 17, you had to get your parents, okay. And I think they might have been glad to get rid of me, so they signed up, and that's the reason that I did it. I'm glad I did, really. I guess some guys that I knew went in the Army, and that's what they wanted to do. Some even went into the well, one fella I know, he was in Patton's Army, and he was a tank driver. So I mean, it was all different, all different things like that. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. And what was your highest rank in the Navy?
Second class signalman. And basically, second class signalman is, if you compare it to the Army, it would be like a staff sergeant.
All right. And basic training, you said, was where again? In
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes.
Yeah.
That's right outside of Chicago.
Right.
And how was basic training?
Well, a little bit of rain, so it was Camp Green Bay was the name of it, and it was fairly new. So there's a lot of stuff that wasn't complete yet, and if it rained, there was a little bit of mud around and what have you. But it wasn't too bad. And during our stay there, I think was 8 or 9 weeks, I forget now, but I think somewhere around there. And anyway, they gave you a test. And one of the tests was, Morse code. And they would take the Morse code and they would, dot, 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 and then they would send another one right after it. And then you had to say, does it sound the same or it's not the same? Well, I just put down, I couldn't tell the difference, so I just put down, yeah, it sounds the same to me. Well, anyway, as it turned out, there was only 2 of us that passed that particular test. So when we got out of the boot camp, they sent us down to the University of Illinois, and that was the signal school down there. And I think I was there for, I think it was like 3 months, and I actually did pretty well. Your score was based on 4.0, and I had 3.46, so I couldn't have been too stupid. So anyway, I got third class signalman out of the school, and from the school we went to Camp Bradford, Virginia, actually Norfolk. And it's kind of weird. They put us on a train, and there was quite a number of us. And it was the old straw back seats in the train, and it pulled over every time there was a train loaded down with war stuff and what have you. We'd have to wait till that. It took us forever to get there. But anyway, when we got there, there was a bus that picked us up, and one of the guys obviously was a Norfolk guy, and our greeting was, got another busload of these goddamn sailors. Well, we were totally shocked, I mean, we didn't ask to come there. That's where they sent us. And I always remember this. Eventually, a good friend of mine was Dan Friedkin. He was a Jewish guy, and he stood up and he really read the riot act to this guy. He says, "I'm going to tell you right now, we didn't want to come here. We were sent here to save you jerks." And so that kind of shut the guy up. But anyway, so we were into Camp Bradford, and I forget now whether it was tents or Quonset huts, but they had these boards because it was all mud, and that wasn't very good. And we started making some landings there, and they had put me in the 6th Beach Battalion, and I was in there for, I'm guessing probably, roughly maybe 6 weeks. And the 6th Beach Battalion and the 7th Beach Battalion were down in Florida making landings. And I guess I just missed them, so I had to stay up there. And we made some landings up at Camp Bradford, just outside of Camp Bradford. And then they finally came back, and then they pulled me out of the 6th Beach Battalion, and they put me in the 294th Joint Assault Signal Company, which, excuse me, mainly what it was saying is you are tied in with the Army and the Navy together. That's why they called it JASCO, 294th Joint Assault Signal Company. Well, we never saw the 294th, the Army part of it, until we got over on Normandy. And so anyway, we finally, and I don't remember exactly when, but I think it was maybe January or February, we got on the Mauritania.
What year?
That was 1944. So it was early 44, like probably, I'm guessing January, February, something like that.
So your training up to that point has been almost a year. It's 10 months or so. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, pretty much. And so anyway, we get on the Mauritania, and so we start out for England. And beautiful sun, and it's clear and what have you. And as we're pulling out into New York Harbor, there's a tramp boat, a big one, and he was coming down. We're going this way, and he's coming this way. And of course, I knew the signals then. They would beep with the horn, which meant one meant this, and this guy would do the same thing, one. And then our guy would do 2 or 3, and this guy would do the same. So I knew they were going to hit us. And there was some soldiers standing, on the railing, and I told them, I said, you better watch out, because I said, that guy's going to hit us. And of course they laughed at me, and they just never moved. Well, sure as hell, that guy hit us, and knocked a huge section, in the bow of the Mauritania. So we had to turn around and go back in, and they spent the night welding on a big piece of metal there to cover it, and then we took off in the next morning. So, and they took the northern route, and it was it was awful. It was just plain awful. And the Mauritania, was a good-sized ship, and by itself, by the way. We had no convoy or anything like that. And everybody got sick. The weather was just terrible, and rocking back and forth. Everyone on that ship got sick, and I'll never forget it. So anyway, it took us, I think, it might have taken us like maybe 10 days to get there. I guess they were zigzagging or something like that, because of the submarines.
Is it normal that you would go without any type of escort?
Well, see, the ship was fast enough. And whatever that meant, that's the reason. So like the Mauritania went by itself, and the Queen Elizabeth, because they were fast. And I guess, if they zigzag, I guess apparently the submarines couldn't get a guide on them. So, yeah, it was normal. Now, if you had a slow ship, then you'd go usually in a convoy. For example, like the Murmansk run, and where they had tankers and God knows what, and those had convoys. I mean, they had destroyers and what have you escorting them. But if you had a fast ship, you didn't need it. So we made it, and we came into Liverpool, and of course they dumped us off there, and put us on a train, and and from the train we went down to Plymouth, England, which was down the southern part of England, and the train dumped us off there, and then they put us on trucks, and we went over to Salcombe, and Salcombe was a little town right on the channel, a beautiful little place. I've been back there, several times, and I just love the place. It's just great. And the people were so good, too. So we were down there, and they had a rugby field, and that was kind of up on a hill. And they had torn, all the rugby stuff out of there, and they put up these Quonset huts. And so that's where we stayed. And to get our food, we would have to go walk down into town, and they had it was a big house there that was converted, and they had women in there that were doing the cooking and that, and they really did a good job. So anyway, so we did that, and we made most of the time we weren't doing much in the way of landings, and I guess maybe because it didn't have the right stuff there for making landings, because it was kind of, like drops into the ocean. But we did a lot of marching, and we'd do like maybe 5 miles and then 10 miles and I don't know how much more. And so finally, from there, there was a little incident. We had an officer, a really nice guy, and he was a full lieutenant, and we in the Quonset huts, we wouldn't get up. You were supposed to go out for muster and that, and what the hell, we just, anyway, he came in a couple of times and warned us, and of course we didn't pay any attention. So then he came in one morning, and he had a Navy guy with a pencil and paper, and he said, all right, Joe, he says, take their names. So there was probably about 10 of us that were still in the sack. So he took our names, and so we had to get up and get dressed, and then they marched us down into town, and there was an old, I guess it was like a hotel. It had rooms, and they had taken it over, and I guess they were using it as a jail, really. So anyway, we walked in there, and the master-at-arms, he was a Navy guy, and so he asked our officer, he said, do you want to put these guys on bread and water? And the officer said, oh no, oh my, no, just put them in the rooms. So there was 3 of us to a room, and then they locked the door. And the 2 guys I was with, one of them had a deck of cards. So we just sat down and we played cards. And this was probably maybe about 9 o'clock in the morning, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh, by the way, we had they had a chow line there, and because we were prisoners, we got to go first in the chow line, which was fine. And then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, our officer, he came by, and he said, now, have you guys learned your lesson? And of course, we all said, yes, sir, we have, which we would have been happy to stay right there. But anyway, so we did get out, and eventually they sent me and several others over to Foy, F-O-W-E-Y. I don't know if I've ever pronounced it right. And that was just another little town. And we did some more marching there and what have you. And then one of my jobs was they had a house there where the officers were staying. And one of my jobs was feeding the coal-fired, you know, to keep hot water going. You had to use coal. And you kept getting the pipes were lead. So you kept getting leaks. And they had an axe there. And when I first went there, I said, what the hell am I doing with this axe? He says, you'll find out. He said, when you get a leak, he said, just hit it. And he says, it'll close up. So I got a couple of leaks. I just went up and hit it, and it closed up. So I did that. I don't know how long, maybe a couple of weeks. I don't remember now. And then from there, eventually, they put me in well, it was in April, actually it was April the 5th, and I got into the 7th Beach Battalion. And we went to Falmouth, and then from Falmouth we got on an LST, and of course we took off on the 4th of June. And I don't know, I think we got out like maybe 5 miles or something like that, I don't recall. But, because the weather was bad. So we had to come back in. And of course we stayed there, and then we left on June the 5th. And of course we're heading for Normandy now. And what happened, it was kind of strange because at around midnight, and of course it was black in the sky, you couldn't see, but we could hear the planes going over. So we knew that was going to be the paratroopers, and the gliders and all that kind of stuff. And so I went up above, up on the bridge, because I figured there's got to be a signalman up there.
This is on a landing craft?
Yeah, it's an LST. You've seen them where they open up and then the ramp goes down. That's pretty good, pretty good size.
How many people does it hold?
Well, they held trucks and tanks, and as far as people, probably I'm guessing you could put maybe a couple of hundred on there.
And what was your LST full of?
I think we had mostly personnel. Now they may have had some other maybe a truck or maybe jeeps or something like that. I guess I never paid attention to it.
Do you know who you were carrying? What from what division, what unit?
I probably did, but I guess I wasn't interested. But all I knew is they were carrying our 7th Beach Battalion, and they might have been carrying some other Navy guys too, in another unit. I don't know. I just don't remember.
But prior to leaving on June the 5th, when did you first become aware that the Normandy invasion was on and you were going to be involved?
Well, actually, they didn't tell us anything until we got on the ship and we were underway. But we knew what was going to happen.
How did you know?
Well, you just get that feeling, that when you see all of these ships out there, you know something big is going on.
And where were you when you loaded onto your LST for the first time?
That was over in Falmouth.
Okay. And describe for me what it looked like prior to June 5th. You said there's a lot of ships. Tell me what it looked like.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was LCIs, in the port area there, and LSTs, and, oh God, they're just a flock. So you knew something was going on.
A lot of activity.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And It wasn't just Navy, was it just Navy personnel?
No, there was Army there that, and God knows what they went on to, that they probably were even on the LSD that I was on, so. You just didn't pay any attention.
Did you, at that time, know the size of this operation?
Oh, no.
No. So you just knew you had to get on a ship and you were going somewhere.
Right.
It was going to be invasion, but you didn't know it was going to be the invasion.
Yeah, I guess that you could say that. But see, when we were on the way, that's when our officer, he kind of briefed us on what was going to go on, but all we knew was it's going to be the big invasion. That was it.
Do you recall anything specifically he told you?
Not really. I just don't remember exactly what he said. But it was the pep talk. This is going to be the biggie, etc., etc. I don't remember all what he said. I guess I was a little bit in shock. But actually, on the way over, kind of a strange thing happened. I went up to the top deck, and there was a signalman up there, and of course I knew they'd have a signalman up there. And so anyway, I was talking to him, and he said, "Boy," he says, "I am so seasick." He said. I said, "Well, didn't they give you any pills?" They gave us pills. And I said, "Didn't they give you any pills?" He says, "No, because they were told that if you're in the Navy, you don't get sick." So he says, "I am really sick." I said, "Well, listen, here, take mine, because I don't get sick anymore. I got sick that one time." So I gave him my pills, and he says, "I'll tell you what," he says, "I have the watch now for the next 4 hours." So he said, "Why don't you go down to my bunk?" And he says, "You can take a nap in there." And he says, because the other guys were down on the steel deck, and trying to get a little sleep or what have you. So I did. I went down and got in his bunk, and then he came down and threw me out, So, but that was kind of a strange incident. I always liked when he said, "We're in the Navy. We're not supposed to get seasick." But I never did get seasick after that episode coming up to Liverpool. So,
How many decks are on the LST?
probably, I would say there might have only been maybe, I'm thinking, down below, and then alongside, the decks where they had the trucks and all that kind of stuff. So that's probably where we were. But I think up on top, so I'd say there are probably two. There was one up on the top, and eventually, when we, oh, by the way, kind of a strange thing happened. Just before the invasion, a very, very good friend of mine, and he was a third-class signalman, exactly the same as myself. And I was scheduled to go in on the second wave, and he was scheduled for the third wave. So, I didn't think anything of it. He didn't think anything, but he was saying, why are they switching us when we're both third-class signalmen? It doesn't make sense. I said, "You're right, I don't know." So anyway, we finally get to Normandy, and they had switched us just before. So instead of me being in the second wave now, I'm in the third, and he's in my place over in the second. And I can remember coming in, and of course the third wave, what they did, they held that up because the beach was in such a mess. They didn't want any more stuff coming in. So we didn't get in till, I don't know, probably like 1 or 2 o'clock or something. And then when I got in, this friend of mine that I mentioned before, Dan Friedkin, he yelled over to me, he says, "Goodall, your buddy got it." Well, I knew exactly what he was talking about. Then I talked to him later, and he said he never got off the LCVP, you know, the small boat. And that bothered me, you know. And I could not figure out why they switched us until many years later. I finally started doing some research. They had me listed as a seaman first class instead of a signalman third class, which is lower than a signalman third class. So somebody with, you know, I guess he decided that, well, they better off, you know, with this over here and this over here. So that's why they switched us. So he gets killed and I don't, you know, so.
What was your role on the ship while it was moving to Normandy? What were you doing?
Nothing. I mean, you know, some guys were playing cards and some were craps, and I guess some guys were praying too, you know.
Yeah, well, describe that atmosphere. What did you see?
Nobody seemed, you know, that they were all excited or anything like that. It was just, it was like, well, I guess this is going to, you know, this is what we're going to do, and that was it. I didn't notice any hysteria or anything like that. It was just that they treated it, I guess, as a normal operation. You know,
And how did you feel?
I guess I didn't know what to feel, you know, and I never panicked or anything. But that's just the way it was. And I don't know, but even you know, a lot of the Army guys, I never noticed them, you know, doing that. They just went about their business. Some of them were even on that steel floor, you know, they were still trying to get a little nap, you know, and just. I guess it was, they were treating it just as a regular trial, you know, but they knew different. There's no point in getting hysterical. What good is it going to do you? You know.
So what were your duties and responsibilities as a signalman? What were you supposed to be doing?
Well, you're talking about on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the first thing when I got in. They dropped it was an LC, we had to climb down that.
Actually, not yet. Tell me what you were supposed to do. Like, what did you train to do? And then we'll find out what you did.
Oh, signal. The signalman, you know, you've seen the guys with the lights, the Morse code lights, and the flags. That's what we did.
All right.
That was it.
Okay, and did you do any training with weapons or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, our group, the Beach Battalion, we had, well, a couple of them had, you know, these, what are they, Thompson machine guns or whatever, and but the rest of us had carbines. And then, of course, we had, you know, the knapsacks or whatever you call them, and we were dressed almost just like Army, and we were attached to the 6th Engineer Special Brigade, which was Army, and next to us was the 6th Navy Beach Battalion. They got hit badly because they came in on LCIs, where on each side of the LCI is, you know, you had the well, that's how you got off. It's like 2 ladders on each side. And of course the Germans had that thing all tagged in, and boom, they hit that. They nailed 2 of them. And well, some of the guys in the 6th Beach Battalion I knew, and they got killed. But anyway, that we came in on the LCVPs, you know, so they couldn't very well, they didn't have that, you know, totally locked in.
Those are smaller crafts.
Yeah, that's yeah, landing craft, they could take 1 vehicle or personnel. That's why they call them LCVP, vehicle or personnel. And in our case, it was personnel. We didn't We didn't have any vehicle on there.
And how would you be able to distinguish yourself as a Navy man versus an Army infantryman?
Well, the helmet. The helmet. In fact, I am not exactly sure, because they show pictures of it, being painted and all that. And I think that it's a weird thing to say, but we had, I thought I had, and some of the guys that I was with, they had it was a gray circle, about that thick, all the way around the helmet. And that distinguished us, as Navy. But some of them apparently must have got some paint or something, and then they put like a circle, I guess it was like a circle, and then they put 7 on there, which meant the 7th Beach Battalion. But, well, there's a story to that. Do you want to hear that one too?
Sure.
This was sometime after D-Day. I'm trying to think now. Oh, they had moved it. Well, first of all, before I got there, we were on the beach, doing the signaling, bringing, small craft in, and
Before we get there, let's build that up. Tell me, you go down the ladder into
Right,
your
yeah,
personal craft.
right.
What are you carrying? You really weighted down?
Yeah, we got just like the Army, and we had our guns, and you had your gas mask.
All right.
And the only thing you could tell, at least in my case, was this gray circle around there.
Around your helmet.
Right.
Green helmet with a gray circle.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
So
Well, I don't know whether it's green, but anyway, probably you're close on it. I don't remember now.
so
But
you're going down. Is
yeah.
it pitch dark?
No,
No?
because when we came in, which was later than we were scheduled. Actually, the first wave was 6:30. The second wave was 7:30. The third wave was supposed to be 8:30. But by the time they got to the third wave, everything was so messed up on the beach, they couldn't take anybody else in. They didn't want anybody else in until they could kind of clean things up. So that's why we didn't get in at 8:30.
All right. So how about this? So you came in. It's broad daylight.
Yeah.
While this was all going on, so did you watch the first wave?
No. Well, I could see some of them going because some of them had like a couple of miles to go in.
How far offshore were you?
Oh hell, I'd say we must have been maybe a mile. That's a guess now.
All right. And
But we actually anchored right next to a cruiser. And when he opened up, or early in the morning, my God, it just shook that LST like this, and he just kept firing. Now somebody told me at the time that it was a British cruiser, but then I found out later that they didn't have any British cruisers there. I don't know why. So it must have been American, but I didn't know that.
do you know where you were in Normandy?
Well, yeah, because we knew we were gonna go on Omaha Beach, and ours was Easy Green. That was our section. So yeah, we did know that.
Okay, so Easy Green, Omaha Beach.
Yeah,
You didn't watch the first wave. You heard the guns.
right.
What else did you?
Well, don't forget now, the reason you couldn't see a lot of this is because they were putting up all kinds of smoke screens. You could see a lot of the ships out there. We could see them firing, but close in that's where they had all these smoke screens, so you really couldn't see anything. So we essentially didn't know. We knew something was going on, but we didn't know what.
Were you on the deck observing all this stuff going on?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Can you describe what you saw? I mean, did you just see, as far as I could see, ships?
well, there was a bunch out there, but not, from what they say, there was like 4,000 of them. And I don't remember seeing that many. And again, they were laying all these screens out because I think, it was fog, really, is what they were putting down. And I think basically what they were trying to do is, in case German planes flew over, that they wouldn't even be able to see, as much of these ships that were out there. So it's kind of a crazy thing, at that point. But then when we got in, we came in and the tide had come in. See, all those guys landed at low tide. And the reason they landed at low tide was so that they could see all the obstacles. Mm-hmm. But when we were going in, they had come up with a path. So here a lot of these guys. One of the bad things about Normandy was the sandbars. And these ships and, LCVPs, you name it, they would come in and then they would hit what they thought was, the, in other words, when you hit the sandbar, they drop the ramp, and of course everybody figures, it's just a walk-in now. Well, it wasn't. They'd walk out, and the next thing, they got water over their head. And what happened was a lot of them, most of them really, had their life belts around their waist. And of course they had the guns and what was it, 60-pound packs or whatever the hell it was. And then they would get out there and they'd just turn right over. And a lot of them drowned like that. That's why the Navy Coast Guard actually saved a lot of those guys. And what they should have been doing is having the belt up here underneath, underneath their arms, which would have kept them from, turning over. But, it's gone.
So what did you see when before you actually land, this is going on, wave number 1, wave number 2.
Yeah.
What are you feeling at that point? Are you grasping the enormity of what is happening?
Yes. That finally, when you start hearing all what's going on, something big is going on. And of course, when you're next to a cruiser firing, and it's shaking this LST up, something's going on.
I mean, are you able to see things on shore going
No.
on? You can't see anything.
No, because they're laying these smoke screens.
All right, but it's very loud.
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah.
All right, so are you getting a little bit nervous at this point?
Yes. Yeah.
And I imagine the rest of the guys that were around you are starting to get a little bit nervous as well.
Yeah, you're getting a little jumpy because you're not exactly certain what to expect. And I think I think that a lot of people, and I don't even know whether we were told this or not, but anyway, they said, don't worry about it because we've got all these ships that that are going to be firing in there, and then the Air Force is going to bomb the beach. That never happened. So what happened, and actually I saw, many years later, that some guys in the Air Force were saying, yes, we bombed the beach, And so a good pal of mine, he's up in Norfolk, and I called him and I said, I never saw, if they bombed the beach, they'd have had some craters. There wasn't any. And I asked him, I said, did you see? He said, there were none. And then later on, there's a guy finally admitted that he was in one of the planes, And he said that the fog was so bad, he said they were scared to drop any bombs on the beach for fear they might hit somebody. So he said they bombed inland. So, and that's one of those things, maybe, and I always thought this way, if they had bombed the beach, they'd have left craters, and it would be, at least to me, would be somewhere where these guys coming in could dive into the, you know, into the craters. But no, they, you know, just, they were, it was like shooting ducks is you know, what it was. That, I don't know why, but those, you know, those things happen, so.
So you're now going down into your LST. Or not your LST, your
LCVP, yeah.
Yes, you're now going into that. Guns are firing, you're the third wave. You got about a mile to go in?
I'm guessing, yeah.
All right. What's going through your mind then? Things getting a little bit more intense for you?
Yes, because, you know, you don't know what to expect. And, of course, they actually had, by the time we got there, they had stopped firing at the beach because the Army had gotten up on top of the hill. So you were pretty sure that, you know, they aren't going to start, you know, shooting at the beach because our guys had gotten up on the top. And so the beach was, I wouldn't say not secure, but, you know, at least they didn't do any shooting on the beach, you know. And so everything that, from that point, like, well, this cruiser, now they were aiming way back, you know, like maybe 20 miles inland. So, so the beach was, I don't want to use the word secure, but the beach at that point was not that bad, not like it was in the early stages. So again, we lucked out on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And
so describe the landing. What did you see or hear, or
well,
that gate opens up? Was it a good landing?
Oh yeah, we actually, surprisingly, because the tide had come in, so they had, you know, our guys had gotten a path. So when we came in, I think we got our maybe ankles wet, and so they dropped the you know, the lid or whatever you call it, I forget now. But anyway, right there as I'm getting off, I see one of our guys floating face down in the water, and that was my entrance, you know. And I thought, oh my God. And then of course when I got in further, as I mentioned before, Dan Freakin, he yelled over me, and, you know, and that's when he said, hey, your buddy got it. And that really bothered me, you know. He was a really good, he was from Texas, by the way. Another story, do you want another story about him and I?
Sure.
Basically when we're over in England.
And who are we talking about, Dan? Or?
No, Dan Freakin, no. Well, he was at this, what I'm talking about. But this fellow, his name was Douglas Vaughn, and he was from Texas. And he and I, you know, he was third class, same as I was. And he had half a tent, and I had half a tent. So they put us in trucks and trucked us over to Slapton Sands. And, you know, we didn't think too much of it, but we always made landings. That's what we did. That's what we practiced. But they took us and put us in trucks and then brought us over to the beach over at Slapton Sands. That didn't make sense. So anyway, and oh, it was cold. Oh my God, it was cold. And I found out later from this guy in Norfolk. I said, did you notice how cold it was? He says, of course it was cold, you idiot. He said they had us in summer clothes, you know, just the light jackets and what have you. And I thought I was going to die for sure. But anyway, so he had half a tent, I had half a tent, and so we did get a little bit of sleep. And then, of course, I had to watch, and it was at night. Nobody coming in. You know, I mean, what are we doing here? You know, we're not bringing anybody in. And then I guess, I'm guessing that was probably, must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning. An LCVP comes in and it had, I'm guessing now, just roughly maybe about 6 officers on it. And they got up and they walked right by us and never said boo. Now that is unusual. But we, you know, we didn't say anything. We thought, well, the hell with them, you know. And anyway, years later, we found out that the Germans had sunk 2 LSTs out there and killed, I think it was 290 some men. And Eisenhower wanted that kept quiet. So he had all the farms and what have you. He had all those people evacuated, and he did not want anybody to talk about that. You know, he didn't want the Germans to find out about that. So anyway, we didn't know what was going on. So anyway, they picked us up, you know, in the trucks and then drove us away. And I didn't find out till many years later that here they had sunk these 2 LSTs. And then my friend up in Norfolk says, yeah, and you know what? He said, we were supposed to be on one of the LSTs, but they didn't have room.
Mm.
I said, oh my God. So, and that was a disaster. That was terrible. And they buried those guys, you know, from the beach to right in the farmland, temporarily, of course. But see, I didn't even know anything about that.
Did you ever find out the identity of the officers?
No, I don't know who they were. I'm not even sure that they were Army or Navy or whatever. They just came, you know, and walked right by, never said boo. So, and usually something like that, you know, they would come in, you know, hey, how are you, you know, and stuff like that. But we never brought anybody in, and that's what was bothering us. You know, if they're going to make landings, that's, you know, all right, we're on the beach, so we bring them in. Never brought anybody in.
Hmm.
So I don't know. That's just a little side story. That.
Right. So let's go back to Omaha Beach.
Oh.
You landed. First thing you saw was one of yours floating.
Right.
What did the beach in general look like?
It was still kind of a mess, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So they must have done a pretty good job of cleaning up, you know, as much as they could. It was still a lot of stuff laying around, but not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
You're talking about soldiers.
Well, there was bodies. I can recall there was one up on the side of the hill there, and God, I kept thinking to myself, you know, of course I'm working with the ships out there, and my God, it was a week later, and he was still up there, and I'm thinking to myself, why don't you go get that guy? But there was mines all over the place. So, you know, I could see, you know, these guys aren't going to, you know, take a chance of running up there to, you know, just to, you know, get the body, so.
Did you come under any fire when you were on the beach?
Well, they say that we did, but basically at that point, they were firing for the ships out there, you know, and most of them, as I was told, were 88s. They make a sound when they're, you know, going. So they weren't aiming at the beach. I guess they were aiming at some of the ships out there. And after that, all we did every night, the Germans would come over, and they'd drop flares, and that always kind of scared me a bit, you know, because, you know, and I finally figured out that they were looking for the Yukon, and the Yukon was a ship out there, and that's where the biggies were. And what would happen, they'd be there, let's say up until, you know, when it turned dark. And then the next morning you see them way over on the other side. because they knew the Germans were coming over and they kept dropping these flares, and I guess what they wanted to do was hit the Ancon if they could, but they never dropped anything on the beach, which was a godsend.
So you're landed on the beach, and what are you doing? What's your immediate job task?
Well, we had my officer, and his name was Al Orton, and he says, all right, we're setting up here, and he said we're going to start bringing in stuff, and that's what we did. Then they had the we did that just to bring them in on land, let me put it that way. Whereas a little later on, they had these pontoons. They were big square things and loaded with air. Excuse me. And then they dragged them, from England over. And so when they come up, they hit the beach, and then they'd sink them, punch holes in them, and they get water in them. And so then we started. I worked a long time on those, bringing them in. Like an LSVP or LCM or whatever, you'd bring them in, and this way they were out, but they landed and they didn't have to go through the water and all that kind of stuff. They would just go in on these pontoons or whatever you want to call them, and did that for quite a long time.
So you're on the beach, and your main task now is to coordinate with the ships to bring in supplies of people.
Right.
So you are coordinating all of that, and you're doing that with Morse code signals and.
Well, it depends. If it's short, which most of the time it wasn't, we would have to use the light. Because we could contact somebody, 5 miles away with the light. And that officer would come up and say, and he'd tell you what ship. He'd say, listen, we need such and such and such and such, and that's going to be on so-and-so ship. And then they'd tell me, what the ship's, what it was, what the number was. And then I just signal out there. I didn't know where the hell he was. But then somebody finally would answer. And then you'd say, oh, there he is over there. And then you'd tell them, hey, we're sending, whatever, anything that may be a boat or what have you out there, and this is what we need. And so they'd send a boat out there, and they'd load it up, and then we'd bring them back in. So, and that's basically what we did.
How long were you on the beach doing this?
3 months.
Long time.
Well, what happened was, I'll say it was a long time. What happened was, my group, the 7th Beach Battalion, they left after, I don't know, like maybe 2.5 weeks, or I forget now exactly, but somewhere like that, maybe 3 weeks, I don't remember. But they sent them, they were gone. So anyway, the Army, the 149th Combat Engineers, they needed a signalman to keep contact with the ships out there. So who was the signalman? Me. So
you got recruited.
So I got recruited. I was told, and so they put me with this captain. I'll never forget his name, John Hammond, a really tough guy. And so I had to follow him around, and he would tell me do this or contact here, do this. And there's one story. It's kind of funny in a way. But this was after the storm. By the way, nobody ever talks about that storm from the 19th to the 21st. I think it was the 22nd, but anyway. You should have seen that beach. It was a disaster. There was all kinds of boats and you name it, all stacked up on the beach. You couldn't bring anything in. That's how bad it was. And I never hear anybody talking about it. So anyway, we couldn't bring anything in. There was nothing flying, and so the one of the officers said, "Hey, I just got word we're going to have to go around the beach And he said, we're gonna have to pick up ammunition or whatever we can find. And he had a big box. So we went around picking up whatever we could find, you know, some belts with ammo on it and what throw it in. Because they couldn't bring anything in, so they were sending it up to the front. And
You were scavenging.
yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, that's good. I like that. And so anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought there for a minute. Oh, yeah, this captain in the Army combat engineers, he said, hey, Goodall, come here. He said, you see that big bulldozer? It's a huge bulldozer down there. He said, we're going to go get that. Okay, you know. So I followed him. We go down there. And of course, this guy Army guy was driving it. And so he said, hey, you, I want you down here. We got to get a path open, start bringing some stuff in, and we can't do anything with all that stuff up there on the beach. You couldn't bring anything in. And the guy said something about, I'm sorry, sir, I can't do that. So he says, how about if I shoot you? And he said, because I'm an engineer and I can run that damn thing. The guy said, I'll be right down, sir. But, I mean, that's the way he was. I mean, he's not going to shoot the guy, but the guy didn't know, I guess. So we came down. And so they started bulldozing, pulling stuff out of the way, and we finally got a path where we could bring in at least something small. And so then we got in touch with some of the ships out there and started bringing them in, and then eventually they kind of cleaned off. But it was a total disaster. It's terrible. I'll never forget that. And then nobody talks about that storm. I don't understand it. But what are you going to do?
So you're literally living on the beach in a tent?
No.
No? Where
No,
are you living?
actually, we were in foxholes. And I'll tell you a short story about that. And, a little bit back from the water, of course, but it was sand. And so I dug a foxhole, and that's, I'd sleep there at night or whenever I didn't have to watch. And so one night, a huge explosion happened back inland. Not right near us, but back inland. It was so big. I'm in there sleeping, and I got my gun and my gas mask. It caved everything in on me. And I thought, I'm done now. Because I thought maybe somebody dropped a bomb right near us, but it was way back. And I had to fight like hell to get out of that damn foxhole. And I finally did get out, because I thought I was done. And I got my rifle out, my carbine. I couldn't find my gas mask though. And I'm thinking, oh, what the hell? I said, it's been 10 days. They haven't dropped any gas on us, so I'm not gonna worry about it. The next day, some LSTs come in, and one of the signals for gas was, these clackers that you have on New Year's Eve. Well, that's one of the signals, and they'll stand out there, and of course, at night, it's very quiet and nothing's happening. And this guy gets out there and he's clacking this thing and he's yelling, gas, gas, gas. And I thought, oh shit, my gas mask is in that hole somewhere. So I went over there and I started digging around. I couldn't find it. So I had to go up and tell the officer. I said, hey, there's a guy down there in LST, he's yelling gas and so on. So the officer, he gets up and he says, where's your gas mask? I said, I don't know, I lost it down there, in a hole, in a foxhole down there, so I can't find it. He says, good luck. So we walked down there, and fortunately, it turned out that it was a phony. But it happened twice, by the way. And I never did find my gas mask, but I found another one on the beach, so I picked that one up and never used it, but it carried it with me. Let me put it that way.
Did you ever keep in touch to find out how the invasion was progressing? In other words, to make sure that you felt secure on the beach, because there were concerns that the Germans would counterattack and try to push everybody back into the sea. So
Well, yeah, and we were aware of that. And but I'll tell you what happened. The first day, Montgomery had landed, and he was in 3 or 4 miles. And here, because now that beach over there was a little bit level compared to that stupid thing we had, which went up like a mountain as far as I was concerned. And yeah, they were back in there, and we would get notifications. Some guy would come down and say, yeah, they're up at so-and-so, like 4 miles in or whatever. And here Montgomery was practically the con, and that's the name of the town up there. And he was there for months. And it took Patton to come all the way around later on, and I guess you'd have to say, was rescuing him. I don't know for sure. But then they started moving. So, he was in, so we knew they at least had a base over there. Whereas our guys, they didn't get on top of that beach from what they told me until probably about 11 or 12 o'clock. Because they were all down below there at, I think it was like 9 o'clock. And finally, I guess this one officer says, hey, if we're going to die, let's die, on the way up. And so they got up and went up there, and finally got up on the top, took out all those, those guns that were, on this hillside, as you might say. Well, we had another experience with this officer. There was a canoe, not a canoe, rowboat, halfway up the, why would you have a rowboat halfway up that big hill? I call it a hill, maybe a mountain. It feels like a mountain sometimes. But anyway, there was about 5 or 6 soldiers around there, and I don't know what they were doing. I could see them, of course. And then there was an explosion. And so, I didn't think too much of it. I thought maybe one of them found a mine or something, set it off. But no, then he yelled down and he said, I need a doctor up here. So fortunately, there was a doctor in the 149th Combat Engineers. He was right there. Now, he's a little on the chunky side. And so anyway, the doctor yells up, bring him down here. Well, this officer of mine, he said, you told us never to move a guy unless it was absolutely necessary. You get your ass up there, I'm going to shoot it off. This is the same guy. Well, this doctor, you could see him. He was running up. This guy was tough, but boy, I tell you, he got stuff done. There's no question about that.
Do you remember the name of the officer?
Yeah, it was John Hammond.
Yes, you did mention that.
Yeah.
John Hammond.
Yeah, I've never forgotten it. His son was in the Vietnam thing. I found out later on.
So did you ever make it inland?
I did go one time. One of the soldiers there. I became friends with several of the soldiers, and we weren't doing anything that afternoon. And he said, "Come on with me." He says, "I know the people back here in the farmhouse." He says, "It's about a mile away." And so we went back there, and here the farmer, his wife, and I know he had a couple of kids, and he had little shot glasses on the table. And so he pours out I'm from Chicago. You pour something in a shot glass, you down it, right? So he said, you know, in French, I don't know what the hell he said. So we take the thing and I go, wow, I'm telling you, I could feel that thing burning all the way down. And the guy, the farmer says, sip, sip. And I thought, oh my God, I thought I was going to die for sure. So anyway, that was one.
Do you know what it was?
Yeah, it's Calvados.
Okay.
And he made it, he made it. And I think it was from apples, but it was strong, I'm telling you. But he was so happy to see Americans, I'm telling you.
And what else happened in your service in Normandy? Did you eventually have to push off and go elsewhere, or?
No, after I was there for 3 months, I talked to this this captain, John Hammond. And, oh, by the way, I never told you, that I lost my helmet. We were up in a tent where the engineers had built it was like so the C-47s could land up on top. So they moved us up from the beach up to the top in a tent right next to where these C-47s are taking off and landing. And so anyway, they had a strip, and I don't know how wide it was. I'm just taking a guess, like maybe 10 foot wide, 15, I don't remember. And they removed the mines. So you didn't want to go on either side of that. It wasn't a good idea. So when I was going down to the beach to work, I would stay between these two. I think there were yellow strips, and that's the way it was. So anyway, this one time I'm coming down to the beach, and I tripped, and my Navy helmet rolled down, and I could see it rolling down. I thought, oh shit. And then it rolled off past the yellow line over on the right-hand side. But I saw where it went in, or I thought I saw. So I went down there and I looked and I said, geez, I think I do see it, and stupid. You're 18 years old, you're not too smart. So I step over and I thought, I think I see it, now see if I can get over to it. And then I heard a loud crack. Now, I don't know whether I stepped on a log or a twig, or maybe it might have been a mine that was a dud. But I jumped back out and I said, that's it. I'm finished with that helmet. So I had to have a helmet. So I went down to the beach, and they had cleaned up quite a bit at that time. But I saw this helmet laying there, and it was 29th Infantry helmet. So I picked the damn thing up, and the guy apparently was shot right through the head, and you could see it. The helmet was hit. So I said, well, what the hell? So I actually put the helmet on my head, and I walked around with it. And I think that's what happened with this Army guy. I think he thought I was Army because I had this 29th Infantry helmet. I eventually donated that to the D-Day Memorial over in Bedford, Virginia. And they have it over there, and I was over there about 2 weeks ago. And they brought out the helmet to show me. And
Okay.
I said, oh my God, they were thrilled that I donated it. So, and I found out, it took me years later, find out that he was killed on D-Day. And, I was pretty sure he was, but I didn't
Did you
know.
find out who that was? Who the helmet belonged to?
Yes. I remembered that it was W.W. Weaver, because that was in the helmet. And eventually, after some 60 years that I had it, it just wore off. And finally, I just pulled it off because you couldn't read it. But I knew it was W.W. Weaver. So when there was a guy in the Paris police, and he was a major, And I got him on the internet and sent him the information because he was very familiar with, what happened to, to the 29th Infantry Division. And then he sent it back to me. He said he was killed on D-Day, June the 6th, 1944. And then he told me what group he was in and so on. A big, where he's buried and the whole thing.
What was his first name?
William.
William Weaver.
William W. Weaver. And then I found out when I went to the D-Day Memorial, they got his name there. So they had, now of course I didn't know that, but then they had me with the helmet and they were taking pictures, and of course I was pointing to his name, William W. Weaver. But I knew he was either hurt or badly, or he was dead, and I just kind of thought he was dead, but and he was. So.
And so that was your helmet for the rest of the war,
Yeah, basically I wore it home. That's all I had.
with a big bullet hole in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Were you ever injured during World War II?
Well, I almost was shot. Right after, well, I shouldn't say right after, but several weeks later, the the engineers built me a big tower, with a light up on it. So I would have to climb up. I guess it must have been maybe 20 foot tall, and so that made it a lot easier because you're looking out, over the Bay Area, so you could contact ships and what have you. But anyway, I'm standing in the doorway because you had a ladder to crawl up, and up rolls a Jeep with a major driving. Now that's a little unusual because the sergeant with him, normally he would be driving. But anyway, so the major is driving, and I'm just standing there in the doorway, and I got my feet spread apart, and I'm just watching them. And this sergeant gets out of the Jeep, and of course you had a thing about that high, that you had to lift your leg over to get out. He's got his rifle on his knee, and he's got his hand on the trigger. He lifts out to get out, and the gun goes off and goes right between my legs. That major went, I've never seen a guy so mad. He went ballistic. He called him a dumb son of a bitch, and he said, "You could have killed that guy, you idiot." And so anyway, I didn't get hurt or anything, but I don't like things that close.
Wow. Where were you when the war ended?
I was, when the war ended, I was in the Philippines. We were there. We were going to make the invasion of Japan. And when they dropped the bomb, and then we made 2 occupation landings. And the first one we took a bunch of soldiers. Now I was on an APA then. I wasn't ship's company. We had a small group of communication guys, radiomen, signalmen, and there was only 10 of us, and they called us Beach Party 76. So there's 10 of us there, but over in the Beach Battalion was like 300, so a little different. And anyway, I think the first place we went to was Okayama, and so it was a seaplane base, and they had bombed the hell out of it. And I picked up a few things, around there, some Japanese money, a few bills or something, which I still have, by the way. And then I don't know how long we were there, maybe a week, I don't remember now. But anyway, then we went back to Mindanao. And they put 3 of us, we were picking up this group, they took 3 of us, and they put us on the beach over at Mindanao in a tent so that we could, keep communication and get all these soldiers on board, because there was quite a few ships there. 2 of those guys get malaria. I don't. Don't ask me why. And So anyway, we finally get those guys all on board, and then we went over, we took them to Okayama. And from what I understand, it was only 20 miles from where they dropped the bomb.
Wow.
And so then from there, we started taking soldiers back to San Francisco. And I think we made 2 trips, and I'm not certain about that. But anyway, I guess maybe you have to call it on the 3rd trip. We're on our way to China. Now, what the hell we were going to China for, I have no idea. We're 3 days out, and we get new orders. Go to New York. So we had to drop down, go through the Panama Canal, and then come up to New York. And of course, New York was cold compared to being out in the Pacific. I mean, it was really cold. And I got a terrific sore throat. Man, I couldn't hardly swallow. And so finally, the typical Navy, they swab your throat and give you a pill and goodbye. So anyway, they sent me, by train out to Chicago at Navy Pier. Well, that was fine. I'm in Chicago. But I got so sick, they were loading me with penicillin and all that, and I just kept getting worse and worse. They actually sent me out to the University of Illinois, where I had gone to signal school. They sent me out there to teach the V-12 units. They're studying for officers and all that, to teach them signaling. So I was on a train, and I can remember the conductor coming back to me, and he says, "Hey, sailor," he says, you're supposed to get off here. This is Champaign-Urbana." I said, "I don't think I can." He says, "My God, what's the matter?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I can hardly move." So the engineer, he's having a fit, "What's going on?" And this conductor said, "Shut up, mind your own business." So he takes my, I had this damn bag, with all the crap in it, sea bag. So he takes that thing and he carries it out and he calls me a cab.
Nice.
And then he comes back in and he helps me up. I mean, I couldn't hardly walk. Then I get in to check in with this captain. He was a full captain. And this captain said, "Oh, Goodall. Oh, yeah." He says, "You'll have to go back." I said, "I can't go back." And I told him the story. I said, I can't hardly walk. So he said, "Okay." He says, "I'll tell you what." He says, "I'm not going to say anything." He says, "If they send you orders, okay, but I'm not going to mention anything." Well, anyway, to make a long story real short, I wound up in the university hospital. And I was in there for 7 weeks. And they finally decided I had rheumatic fever. Then they closed down the V-12 unit, and they sent me, they were going to send me by train up to Great Lakes. And the captain came in and he said, "Hey, Goodall, they shut down the V-12. I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Well, you're going to Great Lakes." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "How are you getting there?" I said, "They're going to put me on a train." He said, "Like hell they are." He said, "That doctor is going to drive you up there." Mm-hmm. So he made the doctor drive me up there to Great Lakes. And I'm up in Great Lakes for 4 months. And they finally discharged me. They said I was fine. Probably half nuts is probably what it was. And so I get home, and then what happened is, I guess about 3 weeks I'm home, and I'm still not doing well. And then all of a sudden I got an attack. I couldn't even walk. And so anyway, he calls up the VA at Hines Hospital in Chicago, and they told him they have no beds. So anyway, he happened to know a retired admiral, so he called him and he said, what should I do? He says, "I can't afford to, put him in a regular hospital." And this admiral says, "Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to follow this exactly. Do not deviate. Take the kid, drive him up there, you get out, go in and get a wheelchair, come back out, put the kid in there, wheel him back up to the reception desk, and you go home. And that's what he did. And this gal there, she said, we haven't got any rooms. You can't stay here. Where's the group that brought? I said, they're long gone. I don't know where the hell they are. So I sat there, I'm guessing probably about 5 hours. And then finally they found a bed. And I was there for 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, they had a bunch of doctors come in. I said, hey, look, have you guys come up with anything? What? They said, yes, we think that you had rheumatoid arthritis and that you shouldn't, you shouldn't have been in flat on your, because of the heart. You should be up exercising. They gave me 2 weeks of lower back radiation. And then they did away with my records. What does that tell you? I was a guinea pig, I guess. But anyway, so after that, I guess I find. Oh, you know what it was, by the way, when I had come up to the captain, and he gave me the doctor right away when I checked in, and he said. The doctor came in and he said, did they x-ray you? And I said, they x-rayed everything. I said, my back, my head, and so what happened was, he said, did they x-ray your teeth? And I said, no. Put me in a car, drove me up to the dentist, and they x-rayed my teeth. I had one of the first where they kill the nerves, pull the nerve out. It was all infected, but I couldn't feel anything because the nerve was gone. And it was infecting everything, all over.
Wow.
And that's what caused it, so.
Who would have figured that?
Yeah, exactly, so.
Is there anything you'd like to tell future generations?
Well, I guess maybe what I would
A piece of advice, something like that.
Yeah, well, I would hope that some of these schools would start teaching kids about history. And I guess now, from what I understand, all they say is something about there was World War II, and and that was it. And I said, to me, they should be getting information on on what happened and what these guys are doing, like the Vietnam guys and all that, what they were doing for the country. And I don't think these kids today realize that. They're just spoiled rotten. I shouldn't say that, but that's what I think. And it's just not good. They ought to have more information. And a couple of times I was asked at the local school to give a talk, and then they canceled it because probably some of the teachers didn't want their precious group to hear anything, so the hell with them. But that's essentially, I think, what.
Well, it's an important message. Well, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to tell your story.
Well, I'm sorry. Maybe I bored you half to death, but
Oh, by no means. It was great meeting you. Great sharing this time.
Well,
and
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing me up here, and I guess I got time to check out before they charge me with another. What is it? After 11 o'clock or something.